All right, well, good morning. It is good to see all of you this morning, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator for the Legislative Town Hall. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we will get started on the conversation. And so today, in no particular order, we have Senator Natalie Murdoch with Senate District 20. We have Senator Candy Smith, Senate District 5. We have Representative Monica Johnson Holster, House District 33. We have Representative Glorstein Brown, House District 8. We have Senator Sidney Batch, our Senate Democratic leader. We have Senator Caleb Tedros, Senate District 41. And we have Representative Zach Hawkins, House District 31. So can we give them a round of applause for being here? And again, I am your moderator for this conversation. I am Dr. Javita Lee. I'm the program director for the North Carolina Black Alliance. And so, thank you. And so we're going to get right into the conversation because I want to focus in on all that's going on across the state. As we know, there is complete chaos across North Carolina right now. And so we're going to dive in. And so this question is directed for anyone. So anyone can kind of jump on in. And so I want to set the scene a little bit. So we're about midway through the long session, and we've already seen the continuous attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, democracy, our environment, reproductive justice. I mean, the list goes on. And so again, this question is for anyone. Describe the condition of our current political landscape here in North Carolina right now. And then the second part, how can advocates and elected officials continue to be in lockstep for the remainder of the session?
So it's interesting, we just had a Senate, 5-hour debate in the Senate about the dumpster fire of a budget that was just passed. And I think the way to capsulize what's actually happening right now is at the end of the debate, Senator Berger stands up and he goes, you've heard a lot from the oppression. I mean, you heard a lot from the, what did he call us? Not the resistance. He called us, the opposition party. I prefer resistance. So he sure as hell didn't use that. He called us, of course, the opposition party. And I sat there and I thought, and I bit my tongue. Many of you who know me, that's hard for me to do, and I did not stand. But what I will share with you guys right now is that it's interesting that he used that word, because what I would say is throughout the history of this country, opposition comes in the form of resistance when the oppressor continues to keep you down. And that is what is happening in the halls of the General Assembly. We have seen attacks in every single way on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have seen them remove and eliminate programs that value our lives and have changed our lives and oftentimes save our lives. They've removed safety nets, and they just want us to, of course, go back to a time in which they had all of the power and that we were silenced. And so as we're moving through and we need our advocates to come forward, especially in the legislature, it's at a time in which we just have to be loud again. I think many communities, especially young individuals, do not understand and are so far removed from the civil rights movement that they've become complacent and don't know how bad it can get. People know and they're feeling how bad it can get. And I think that we need to find those individuals and those leaders to speak out and to speak loudly. I say in the Senate, if we lose, we're going to lose loudly, and you're going to hear us in every single corner of the state. But that is our job as one of the 50 senators, one of the 20 of the 50 senators, to be able to stand on that floor and to speak out when we know that there are wrongs. And so in that regard, we need y'all's voices, especially in our communities, of people who do not have the time to go ahead because they're working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet to figure out what's happening in Raleigh. And so it's really important for us to get out into our communities and speak to people about what the Republicans in Raleigh are doing.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Batch. And I would add to that, what is you're always too loud when you were never meant to be heard. I heard that quote about 6 months ago, and it stuck with me, that they never want us to talk back. They want us to just take what they are giving us because somehow it's better for us, that they're in control. And I'm surprised Senator Batch didn't say anything because she doesn't bite her tongue much. That's a good thing. That's why she's in leadership. But what I would say in community, one thing that has happened, especially in the House, the DEI bill, Monica and I were waiting for it because we were going to debate it, but they pulled it 3 times from the calendar. Yeah. They pump faked 3 times, and the reason that they did is because people packed the gallery. People packed the gallery. And they have, just like we have competitive seats we want to win, they have seats that they don't want to lose. And they can't be on tape, on camera for the people of North Carolina to hear them say why they want to do away with programs that help Black and brown people, those that help those with developmental disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. And to add on to the senator's point, it's your voice, but it's also in district. So if you have people who are in the opposition party, I'll call them the opposition party. If they're in the opposite party, in leadership, in majority, let's do things in their districts too, because that's one of the things that they depend on. They depend on their folks not being able to make it, following this national narrative and leaning into it. But if we come to show that people in their districts don't agree with this, they don't want to face the music. We've seen that with their congressional colleagues. They don't want to hold town halls. They don't want to face messages that are in opposition to the things that they are espousing. And so we have to do the groundwork. Coming to Raleigh and stopping the debate is amazing, but going to their district and giving them the heat is second level. And so that's exactly where we need you all, fraternities, sororities. Advocating for your community is not partisan. Let me say that to all the organizations that have 501c3s. Advocating for your community, asking questions, being informed is not political. You're doing your civic duty.
And I just want to add the reason why they don't want you to ask questions, they don't want to go to town halls, because they don't have an answer. They are told what to do, and they must walk lockstep. If they do not, they will be challenged. They don't want that. They want the power. They want to stay in the position. So they dare not go against what their leadership tells them to do. So if you ask them, what reason do you have behind this bill? They cannot articulate that. They can't clearly explain it because they don't know. How do we know? They speak to us silently. They pull us to the side sometimes. They voice their frustrations. They don't like what's happening, but they feel like they can't really change it right now because of this MAGA push, and they don't want to be pushed out.
I would add to my colleagues, and thank you, Representative Hawkins, for bringing up our Divine Nine, that our reach is endless. Most of you know that I came from the advocacy side of things before sitting in this seat, and I've always believed strongly in an inside-outside game. Changing the political landscape doesn't happen just with elected officials. It is a partnership, advocates, legislators, and activists. And so I tell my colleagues here in Wake County is, when you're going to throw the flame, just let me know, since I'm now on the inside, so that I can ensure that we know where the fire extinguishers are, because sometimes we are going to have to throw the flame to be clear that we are collectively concerned about our well-being, that when we speak, we are not speaking for a district, we are speaking across our community, and that can only happen if you're engaged with us. So this is what I will say. If you're in this room, you're already with us, right? Because you understand the value and importance of being a team and having an intentional, consistent message. What I will ask you to do is, if you aren't already advocating in your community or their community, is start simple. Your neighbors, the grocery store, your family. We take for granted, if we're in this room, that people understand what's at stake other than the price of their eggs. They don't really understand our full democracy and livelihood is at stake. And so it's up to you to turn around, talk to your neighbor, grocery store, church, and say, have you been paying attention to what's happening? Did you hear that there was a 5-hour debate on how bad the Senate budget bill is? Say the things that piques people's interest. So my recommendation to you is, you continue to be here in this space and use your voice, but start to bring your friends and family along with you, kicking and screaming, because it is going to take that for us to intentionally change. It is a crisis point, and it's going to take all of us to actually change the trajectory of where we're going.
Absolutely, and echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and do want to publicly thank the chair of our Legislative Black Caucus, Senator Candy Smith, for her leadership as soon as the anti-DEI bill was released in the House. I still mess up your last name, Caleb Tedros. We worked collectively together to make sure we got in front of it. Had a press conference, the Black Alliance, they were also right there with us at the forefront. and just really have to stress the people power that we have. The reason that we are oppressed is because the other side can't win just with ideas. Their values actually do not align with the majority of North Carolinians. The majority of North Carolinians voted for us in the Senate specifically by 50.1%, in the House closer to 51%. So that is why our maps are so very gerrymandered. To be clear, we are under oppressive minority rule. They do not have the numbers. We continue to be oppressed because we have maps that don't truly show the value of the votes that we have. So want to be clear on that. And the oppression that we even face as legislators is really being normalized. I joined the Senate in 2020, and even with huge pieces of legislation like the budget, it was released on a Monday night. None of us saw it before it was released in the Senate. It started in the Senate this year, and we're up all night combing through it, you know, searching a PDF that's hundreds of pages. But the reason that that is relevant to all of you is, in addition to all the anti-DEI in the budget, everything Black, everything diverse, everything equitable has been deleted. I see the previous director of the Hub office here, Tammy Hall, completely disseminated. Not only did they get rid of the Hub office, they went a step farther to say the secretary for DOA cannot even bring a committee together to see how they are going to help minority businesses. The reason that that is significant is at the federal level, the reason that they're attacking federal jobs is that is literally the backbone of the Black middle class are those who are federally employed, state employees, same for government contracts. My own grandfather in Guilford County lifted his entire family out of poverty through having a concrete company and got those government contracts that you would not continue to get if you were not qualified. So in addition to education, we would be remiss if we looked over the economic impact of these policies. They want people to be poor and hungry and miserable. So we're at a time where this is a Black Summit. I've been here since I was an intern for this summit. And this year particularly, we really have to get together and strategize and organize because, quite frankly, if you are silent at this time, you are complicit. You are complicit. If you are not with us, if you are not helping us to figure this out, I don't know what we're going to have left. So I think this is one of the most critical that we will ever have. We're still in the super minority in the Senate, so we are leaning on advocates like you. We're going to do everything we can and have the 5-hour debates and the amendments and all the things, but it's really going to be imperative for all of the organizations you represent, whatever it is that you do, this is the time to do it so that we can fight back, and we can. We saw it in the House with them pulling that bill off the floor. And I'll end with knowing that as electeds, you are all over the state. That's what I love about the summit. Reach out to your majority member representation and say, this is not what it is that you should be doing, because they have every right to answer to you as well.
And I'll just add briefly, I'm Alan Boyncy from Orange County, but to build off of what Senator Murdoch has said, and then also Representative Hawkins, there was a bill that was in House elections a couple of weeks ago, bill called, it had a bland name, but it was about voter registration forms. Despite that innocuous language, this bill would actually criminalize groups that register voters. Essentially would say that groups out there cannot actually use the real form to register voters. What they got to do is download a PDF and use this kind of model form that people can't actually use to fill out and then send in to register themselves to vote. And it's not really clear why they're doing this. We know that the kind of impact that would have, especially on our faith communities, especially on our civic groups. And so, that's another example of a bill that was pulled, I think, because a lot of folks were really upset about that, and they emailed and they wrote, they called every single person on that House Elections Committee. But that kind of work makes a difference. Reaching out as much as you can, getting other folks to reach out about various bills, it can make a real difference. The other thing I'd say too is that one of our challenges in Raleigh is to get the word out to the folks that need to know about what's going on. Things like work requirements, things like what Senator Murdoch and Leader Batch have said about this budget and how this budget is going to hurt people. Folks in a lot of parts of North Carolina, they don't know. And so we need your help, whether it's signing up for our newsletters and forwarding that out to your groups, or whether that's talking to your neighbors, your family, your friends, or whether that's, you actually going to these communities and talking to people yourselves. We need your help in amplifying what is going on in Raleigh that is hurting people. So, thank you.
Good morning. I've sat and listened to my colleagues, and they are all on point, and I'm not going to go back and repeat everything that was said, but I just want to say, this is my second term serving in the North Carolina House, and I did sit in on the Senate when they were in trying to debate that bill, that DEI bill, and when to hear the other side to say, whenever they're asked the questions and on camera, to say, oh, we work with everyone. We try to work with the Democrats. We try to do this and try to do that. But when they present these amendments and good amendments that will help make sense of some things to try to balance it out, everything, and I think on the Senate side, it's called tabled, right? That's the word, and I heard that word table so many times, till I was like, Lord have mercy, where, so every time Senator Murdoch and Batch and Senator Smith and some of the rest, and even Senator Caleb, all of them, they had something to say, but they were tabled. So it's not that, don't think that they're not in there trying to work and trying to get some things that will make sense of what they are trying to pass and throw on us. It makes no sense. So I just want to say that, we, like my colleague Hawkins was saying, the first day we were able to get the word out, and like the Alliance and other organizations, we stood in solidarity. We all came in our black. We wore black. Well, somebody was paying attention, or it bothered somebody on the other side, because when we were in the cafe, in the cafeteria, they walked up to the table and said, are y'all in mourning? And I said, well, since we've been up here, we've been in mourning every day. I said that. I did. I said, we've been in mourning every day. And he looked at me funny. And so I'm just saying that please keep looking at your emails, your messages, and if you're able, I know some of it is a drive or a ride for some people, but when the call is made, please come. We need that gallery full, and I'm going to leave it at that.
And I'll just quickly touch on other points. And my name is Caleb Tedros, and I'm over in the Senate. As one of the freshmen in the Senate, it has been a bit shocking at the sort of lack of vigor with some of the bills that are introduced, especially around DEI. If you attend or watch any of the committee meetings, or if you just read the bill, I mean, you can tell these are people that just looked at polling, went to ChatGPT and said, let me get a bill that pisses off black folks. And then they move on. And so, but the problem with that is, at no point in North Carolina should DEI be sort of a bad thing. It's sort of on us that we got to a point where anti-DEI bills make sense for a Republican, because we look at the same polls. If you're representing a rural county and you take a look at the folks that you represent, it makes sense in terms of your popularity to introduce an anti-DEI. And that's where we fell short in North Carolina, not making people realize in rural North Carolina that DEI helps you out. Like, there are folks in that building who have gotten scholarship money because they came from rural towns. That's DEI. So at no point should a senator or even representative who represents, somewhere in Appalachia ever vote for something that's anti-DEI, because you're in Appalachia. There are a ton of no, not disrespectfully. There are a ton of scholarships and programs we've had for folks in Appalachia because they've been historically under-resourced, and that, by definition, is anti-DEI. And so that's where we have to assume the responsibility and be a bit more strategic in crafting the message to folks. So when I even talk to folks about DEI, I can go on about how it helps black folks, but to be quite frank, black folks are already on our side with this. You all know the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion. Private corporations also know that. But it's these other folks that seem to be against it, that don't even realize that it benefits them, that we need to tailor our message to. It should never be comfortable for any politician in North Carolina to be anti-DEI, no matter what party they're at. And that's where we need to change the conversation to.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you for that. And so I'm going to move us over and expound on the democracy point that Representative Buoyancy actually brought up. So as we know, the state of our democracy in North Carolina, but nationally, is in a state of emergency. That's just where we are. And so when we think about our multi-month judicial challenge, intended to discount several thousand eligible ballots, several pieces of legislation, one of which you just mentioned, HB 127, and then there's several other bills, HB 66, HB 411, which are trying to reduce early voting to the point where Sunday voting would be eliminated. And when we think about our communities, we've been stolen to the polls since Kingdom Come, and so we need our Sunday voting access. That's a part of our whole thing as organizations. And then at the federal level, we have the SAVE Act that was introduced that was essentially going to be a modern day poll tax, because it was going to require folks to either get a $165 passport or a $60 birth certificate, and then it would leave out our elders that may have been born without a birth certificate. So what documentation can they go back and get? And so with all of these things that are going on with our democracy, and this is again open to everybody, is the state of our democracy repairable? Or do we need to seriously consider new or alternative systems?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It is repairable. First of all, if you go into the situation defeated already, then you're not going to do what you should do. Pastor G just laid it down over there. He talked about the action. You can talk and complain all you want to, but if you don't have action behind those complaints. So as elected officials, I think it's part, for many of you, you should be educating your communities on what's taking place. The reason why people are so disengaged is because they don't understand. It's like when you read the King James Version of the Bible with thus and thou, and they say, man, I don't know what that is. You got to break it down. So when you explain to them what they're taking away, when you explain to them what's truly happening, they perk up. Because then they say, really? People don't know what's happening. So you have to educate your communities. If you're not holding town halls, you don't have to be the federal level. You don't have to be the state level. You should be hosting town hall meetings. And you should be reaching out to your representatives from the state level, asking them to join you. That gives you validity as well. But when people know, then they do. When they don't know, they say it does not affect me until it affects them. And then they're calling you. And it's easier if we come together early instead of waiting until it's too late and you've lost so many critical things. So is it repairable? Absolutely it is. Is it going to be easy? Definitely not. But nothing has ever been easy for us. We've always overcome. We're made for this moment, but we must make sure that we're moving forward to change the future that we know we should have. He already said we're all supposed to be at this table. But if you come with a defeated mindset, you will not be at the table. So never let anybody tell you what you can't do, and you step up. Every little bit counts. If you're elected or not, I don't want nobody to say, well, I ain't elected. So what? You got a mouth, speak, talk to people. And I will say, if they stand on your couch and they ain't voting, kick them out.
Amen. It's times like these. For folks who don't know me, I'm a huge history buff. But it's times like these where I think about the people who came before us. I think about just going back to the Civil War, for instance. You had over 180,000 black troops fighting for a country that did not give them the right to vote, that did not give most of their people freedom, and yet they were fighting for a promise, the promise of America. They're fighting for freedom. And then you just kind of go right on down the line through Reconstruction, through Jim Crow. You had people fighting because they had an enduring vision for this country, being the kind of place where everyone, especially themselves, ourselves, could be respected, would be dignified, would have the full rights as any other person. And so, like what Senator Smith said, yeah, I mean, the fact is our democracy is breaking, but we always have a fighting chance because we have a legacy. Our people, our community, we have a legacy of fighting against immense odds, against a system that's designed to disempower us, against a system that is designed to put us down. And so I just say we're not new to this fight. We are not. And we have some tools that our ancestors did not have. So let's use it. Let's use our voices. Let's use our votes. Let's use our ability to make sure that every one of us is educated about the stakes and move forward.
Yeah, I definitely think we're at a time where, I mean, democracy is in crisis. I'm not going to gloss over that. But definitely echo the sentiments of my colleague, Brett Bunsey, where I really do think these are times where you have to look backward to go forward, and I'm sure that will be a theme at the conference this year because, I mean, particularly when you're looking just at Black people and how we literally went from being property that had no legal rights whatsoever, we could be sold, trafficked, and we were the basis of the economy. We built this country and continue to just not have rights, to not have values. And so to think of those that came before us to refuse to accept that, whether they escaped, whether they, you know, despite not getting their 40 acres and a mule, literally made a way out of no way, we are back to those times. I think of folks like Thurgood Marshall that said we're going to make the Constitution apply to us. You may say we don't belong here. We know we do. We fought to be here since we did build this country. So yes, things are bleak, but they have in fact been worse. If you look at that time and just think of how bold it was for them to continue to say, we are going to make America do what is right. We're going to make you live up to the ideals of this country. And just yesterday, there was just a phenomenal proposition I heard from Pastor Jamal Bryant of the ability for Black Americans to even continue to be patriotic in the midst of everything we've endured, to continue to say, we're still going to celebrate these holidays, we're still going to be here, we're not leaving because we deserve to be here. So I really would just challenge us to remember those times. But to be clear, especially with what is going on at the judicial level, and I know Justice Earls is here at the conference as well, I mean, when I tell you we are hanging on by a thread, if they're able to steal a Supreme Court race in broad daylight, to think that that won't be a case study to do that in other states to challenge over 60,000 votes, I mean, you know, so we really, really are at a very fragile time, but that's why we have to just continue to lean in and do the work, and to be honest of, the justice system isn't broken. The justice system was never built for us. It was never built for us to succeed. It's just that folks continue to fight, continue to litigate, continue to push forward, continue to protest to say we're going to make it be what it claims that it wants to be. But to be clear, it was never built for us. They had to add so many amendments to the Constitution to say, oh, and by the way, women get this, men get this, Black men get this. You're no longer, you do have full citizenship. So we are at a crisis point, but that is why we're here, so that we continue to chart that path forward.
Absolutely. Want to add anything?
I was just going to add, last session, the Republicans in the Senate said, let's get this bipartisan group together. We're going to fix voting. And I was like, well, voting is actually not problematic. You broke it, but that's fine. We'll come to the table. So I'm in this meeting, and I said, if you really care about voting, you want every single person in North Carolina to have access to the ballot box, which is what you say, and this is the premise behind your entire argument, then why don't you allow every single community college to actually be a place in which people can vote? And we can open up. We control that at the legislature. We fund it. Open them up. One of the senators slipped up and said the quiet part out loud. And he looked at me and he said, well, why would we do that? Those people vote for you. And so let's be really clear. All of what they are doing with regards to our democracy is by design. Because let me also tell you that the oppressor will never give you the education you need to overthrow them. And that is the reason why we have a public schools who are literally being defunded. And we are in a position in which they are attacking our voting rights. And so the only way we can do that is by coming together and using our resources and our knowledge to educate those individuals. When I was at a door and knocking on door and canvassing, a young woman said, I said, have you voted? She goes, no. And I said, well, why are you not going to vote? And she goes, I don't know, I just got off my job. I'm not going to vote, but I'll pray for you. And I said, I'd rather you vote. I got a lot of people praying for me. But prayers are not going to, in this situation, help you when you literally do not go and use your power and your vote to make sure that you have electeds that actually represent you. And we are in this time in which we have to figure out how to get out of this mess. And no one's going to do that but us. And so that's why it's really important to know that these Republicans know exactly what they're doing. They're now saying it out loud. They do not care about our lives, and they do not value our opinions. And the only way that they can continue to stay in power, because what I would also tell you about DEI is that Republicans, they do like DEI. You want to know why? Political gerrymandering is the only way they keep their seats. They love some DEI because that's how they keep their power. So they only like programs that help them. And voting is the one way in which they are obviously taking that power from us. And so I know it's hard out here. Look, anybody on this stage, we will tell you that we have very, very difficult days. And it is hard to be in that building, especially with a lot of oppressive, hateful, and bigoted individuals. And evil. But we stay there because we know that we have the great privilege to be in a situation where the vast majority of North Carolinians cannot, and we can speak out to that, and we can do as much as we can. And so we need you guys in that part. We'll be loud from our bully pulpit. We also just need to partner with you in that process to make sure that every single voter knows that they're trying to, of course, work really hard to take away their power. And we need to remind people that they actually are the ones who have the power in the first place.
Absolutely. Thank you for those responses. And I kind of want to stay on the topic of education that you just mentioned, Senator Batch. And so I'm going to toss this question to Representative Hawkins first, and anyone else can join in. And so we are in the year of our Lord 2025, and Leandro is still not fully funded. But we have found a way, ironically, to fund private schools, private school vouchers, and we're taking public funds to make sure that private schools thrive. Which exclude, folks that could actually benefit from the financial assistance, and it strips away critical funding from our public schools that need it the most. And so when we think about that, how do we ensure that public education is consistently and equitably prioritized in North Carolina?
Yeah, I got a really good answer up here on the stage. And it's not taking out the people who vote like us. But what I would say is public education is always, education in general in this country, back to Senator Murdoch's sort of history lesson, has always sort of been this thing, right? The more we got educated, they understood that teaching us to read and write gave us education because, as Senator Batch said, if you knew more, if you knew better, there's no way you can oppress me, right? And so Brown v. Board, desegregating schools. Public education has always been this lightning rod, and so this is just the latest iteration of them trying to have segregation academies. And the thing that you need to know about the private vouchers is that whether you make $0 or $1 million, you are eligible. And so, I can't remember Senator Batch. She used to be in the House. She used to be in the upper chamber.
These days, y'all are definitely
When we were in the House together, they could not spend, they were only spending about $12.5 million. They couldn't give the money away because people really weren't requesting it. And so now they have gone on this marketing campaign to ramp up and take away all of the restrictions so that they can get people to say, you know what, I like this, I want to do this. But these are the implications. The implications are that after a certain number of students leave the classroom, that is a teacher that is gone, right? That means that those students are coming from mostly black and brown schools, which takes more, per diem away, which is the ADM away from every school. And that means those schools are less funded and they get less resources, right? And especially now from the federal government. And the best way for us to make sure that we are fighting for public schools is making sure they do understand, and people locally, you don't have to necessarily talk about the Leandro plan, because people don't know what Leandro is, but they understand that North Carolina is in the bottom 10 for per pupil spending and teacher pay. And at the end of the day, schools need a few things. They need a great principal, but they need great teachers in every classroom. And that's exactly what they're taking away from us. And they are segregating our schools. That is very clear language that you can give to anyone. And the other thing that I would say that is important to the original question is allow people to open the doors to a public school and see what's happening. There are some amazing things happening in public schools. Kids are learning. We have exemplars, schools for the nation, the things that we're doing, even in Durham with public-private partnerships. I mean, they're meaning private, meaning Duke University, not like private anything else. Let me clarify that. We have a program that allows kids who want to go into healthcare to graduate with a degree from Durham Tech, and then they go straight to Duke Health to get a STEM job. And so a health-related job. And so those things are happening all across the state of North Carolina. And so we're innovative, we are doing the things, and the one thing that corporations also say, and this is one thing that you have to invite them to the table, is they are saying we want strong public schools. The North Carolina Chamber came out to, okay, we got some assistance. Okay. The North Carolina Chamber came out 2 years ago and said that they want us to invest in public education. They understand the correlation between making sure that kids are prepared, have the soft skills, and everything to fill the jobs, not only of now, but of the future. And so, yes, public education is still a top priority, but we have to be incredibly clear about the numbers, how we are at the bottom, yet we say we're one of the best states in the country. We've dropped from number 1 to number 3 in places to do business. And the less that you invest in public education, the further down the line that we will go. And this push for DEI in public schools, or anti-DEI, does not make the well-rounded student that we need to compete in the 21st century. And so our business community is behind making sure we have public schools, but most importantly, let them know that segregation is amongst us, and it's coming in the form of those vouchers that is killing public schools. Last point before I pass it on, there are about 30 counties in the state that have 0 to 2 private schools. 0 to 2. So that means you're only subsidizing urban areas, which if you're in Fayetteville, you're in Raleigh, you're in Durham, you're in Greensboro, you're in Charlotte, it is a direct attack on pulling black and brown students out of our schools and crumbling them so they can say that they're not performing well, so they can take them over or shut them down completely.
That's a great note for me to pick up on. So the thing that I've keep saying is, what is the best tactic? And I see Senator sitting in front of me, that the military and every institution uses to get what they want: starvation. And we are in a place where systematically they have begun to starve public schools. And my personal opinion is public schools is the first place that they started to decimate, to show us exactly what they were capable of and how low they would go, to change every institution that we have created and built to meet the needs of all communities. Because to be clear, when we do something, it just doesn't benefit us, it benefits everyone. And public schools is the great equalizer. So thinking about the fact that they're starving the public schools, and my grandmother said to me very early, if you do nothing else, you go to school and make good grades, because it is the thing that they can't take away from you. Well, starvation is taking that away from us. If you decimate our public schools, our kids who remain there, who are going to be black, brown, and poor, right? And the most disenfranchised will be both black and brown and poor, and not just poor. That has happened across the state, but more importantly, it's happened in our urban areas. Because if you show our state that you can decimate our largest urban areas, our largest school districts. Wake County has 200 schools. If you decimate a district like that, and fortunately we have a county who continues to be supportive, we don't have to worry about what to do in Duplin. They don't have to worry about what to do in Transylvania, because they will have done the due diligence to de facto segregate our schools. And guess what? and I ultimately believe this, we are a case study for everything that they're going to do across this nation. So our colleagues in other states are watching the starvation tactics be put into play. They are watching, to Representative Hawkins' point, that when those kids leave, their teachers leave. And then the question, they try to complicate it, and I think this is an important point to make, is, well, it's just the per diem we're removing from your school. Well, the per diem isn't the only way we pay for our students. The per diem pays for, yes, that pupil and that teacher, but it also pays for all the wraparound services that public schools provide, that private schools do not have to provide those same sources of wraparound services. So hear me when I tell you that for those of us who they started to market the campaign, well, I love when I got an Opportunity Scholarship mailer at my house, and I was like, honey, we have met the lottery. They are now asking us to send our child to a private school using Opportunity, because they are using the demographic to decide who they market to. They didn't send it to me because well, at the time I was a school board member, they sent it to me because I'm Black in a household with a child who was public school age. If they remove the best of our students, right, the middle working class, you leave nothing at our public schools. And we will have to hold and bear that burden as well. So I'm asking you to pay attention to that, because those students left in those buildings will still need our services and they will need our support. I can also tell you, lastly, as a school board member, when they leave, guess what they do? Return for high school. You know why they return for high school? Because in the state of North Carolina, we have a great relationship with our public institutions, and we have the best public higher ed institutions in this country. So they come back 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, so they can be sure to be in the data spreadsheet to get into UNC Chapel Hill. So I want you to think about the method of madness that is happening. Remove them, K through 10, and return them so that they can then get into one of our illustrious higher public education institutions. That is how systemic this is happening in our state.
I guess another perspective also, that conversation also needs to be had ahead of time. I think what I've seen, especially from a lot of these issues, you're oftentimes not going to get a straight up response of like, we won't fund this. It's always because we don't have any money. And so we were speaking with a group of police officers in regards to their retirement. And the problem is that conversation needs to happen upstream when we talk about things like the corporate tax rate and income tax rate. Because the problem is at the beginning of the session is when they drain the state of money, and then later on, when you're there advocating for Black maternal health, when you want more social services, when you realize that our juvenile detention centers are 43% vacant, when you realize that our teachers per GDP, we're about 50th in the nation in terms of spending. That's when we try to bring up these issues, but they need to happen upstream when we talk about the total revenue of the state, which comes from income taxes and corporate taxes. So whenever you hear somebody saying, we need to further cut the corporate tax rate, in your mind you should just be thinking, they're trying to lower teacher pay. They're trying to cut school funding. They're trying to cut everything that the state should be providing. And that's sort of the rationale we continue to see, because they cut first. You say what you want money allocated towards, and they say there's no money left. And so I would just like for everyone to also keep that in mind when things as arbitrary as finance and taxes come up. We need to be involved in that conversation as well.
Absolutely. And so I want to shift gears a little bit to maternal health. Thank you for mentioning that. And so I know we just had our Black Maternal Health Week for North Carolina. And so citing the challenges Black women and Black birthing parents face in childbirth, as well as disparities in care, and thinking about how we are in a state that has consistently stripped away access and proper care for women and birthing parents. I'll start with you, Senator Murdoch. How do we grapple with the very real lived experience of women and birthing parents, especially Black women and birthing parents, when it comes to accessing quality care in a state where leadership is completely divided on this issue?
Yes, thank you so much, Jovita. And actually with this question, I'm going to just start with a thank you, because so many of our partnering organizations that helped to make that such a huge and successful event. When I came into the Senate, really wanted to focus on this issue just from having a close friend that almost died. I had another family friend that was pregnant during COVID, and she became sick with COVID. and was critically ill in the hospital. They airlifted her to Duke University. She survived, but her child did not. So just with so many near-death experiences, just said, clearly there's something that we're really, really getting wrong here. And so this week, we had our largest Black maternal health Advocacy Day at the General Assembly that we have ever had, knocking on 200 participants. Also want to add, this is year-round work. It's not just a one-off where we just come to the General Assembly in our purple. Particularly for those of us in the larger urban areas, we work with our large healthcare systems. And I do want to give Duke University Healthcare System a shout out. We quietly work with leadership at the very top, and we'll lead with a positive because it's going to relate to all the anti-DEI rhetoric that we're hearing. Outcomes are actually improving for Black women in Durham because of the work that we've been doing with community-based organizations, working with Duke Health. HRM is also doing a lot of great work, even with mobile units. Those that were utilized during COVID said, why can't we continue to use those to have those wraparound services, doulas, midwifery? We weren't even having serious conversations around midwives and doulas until all of our Black maternal health conversations. But particularly in this political time with all the anti-DEI rhetoric, I think that is why we had the biggest Black maternal health day, because when you don't want to talk about issues and you're able to make a data-informed decision with the data showing you Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from childbirth, that so many of those deaths are preventable, the data is showing you that. And when we say women, go a little bit deeper. Women with PhDs, Black women have more master's degrees than any other demographic. Those with phenomenal health care, they have the Blue Cross Blue Shield coverage and whoever else that are still having these near-death experiences. So it's not that they didn't have the education to articulate the pain that they were enduring. History tells us in textbooks, Black OBGYNs will tell you there was a time where the textbook still told them Black women's skin is thicker, they can endure more pain, going all the way back to the root of modern OBGYN practice is rooted in racism, where they performed experiments on Black women, sat around her and cut her up, a very specific woman, and said, hey, let's see what happens. That is how we have modern OBGYN practice. So we do have to unpack that, and that's why you don't have doulas and midwives anywhere. There was a time where Black women were very involved. They were strategically pushed out, and lo and behold, that's when our outcomes started to decrease. There was a time where in culture, you had those wraparound services of making sure you cared for those who just had a child. When my grandmother was born in 1913, when she came home, she had 5 children. Everyone came to help her out. She was not on her own for a solid 2 weeks. The house was full. And so the positive in North Carolina, we've been talking about this for so many years, and nationally, Black Mamas Matter Alliance and so many other partners, that we even had bipartisan support for things like Medicaid coverage for doula services. Midwifery care has actually been expanded around 2-4 years ago. They had been talking about it for years. It didn't happen until we started showing up and asking these questions. If we weren't in the bleak financial situation we were in, especially federally, with healthcare, I think we probably would have gotten that done this session to have Medicaid funds to actually be utilized for doula services. But more than anything, Black women were just sick and tired of being sick and tired. The beauty of this work, and even shout out to my colleagues like Representative Brown and Leader Batch and so many others sharing their birthing stories of near-death experiences. They just didn't talk about it. You just kind of quietly went along knowing something didn't feel right, something was off. And my own friends who didn't share their stories with me until we started doing this work of, hey, this happened to me, I knew this wasn't right. We shared the story of Tamika Isaac, who a simple urine test could have kept her baby alive. She had health disorder and literally passed out, hemorrhaged so much, her husband had to tell her what happened. She was out for 3 days solid. Again, master's degree, health care. So we know that these deaths are preventable. We know that racism is a big part of it. And it's not the time to say, oh, since people don't want to talk about DEI, we're going to shy away from that. It's the perfect time to continue to remind people of that because they're aware of it. So the work for us will continue. This political season shall pass because, again, we are making strides, making improvements because we are talking about it. You can't address the issue that you don't face. So we're just getting started. We're going to continue to do this work. There are national partnerships in states like Pennsylvania. They were also filing a mominous bill, and lo and behold, their politics changed. They went from the minority to the majority. They have a black woman speaker. So for the second year in a row in Pennsylvania, they have passed a omnibus bill that is fully funded. The same for Virginia. So I'm optimistic that right here in North Carolina, the tides will eventually turn. The numbers are in our favor. And when we're holding gavels, we'll be able to fully implement these policies that are well studied, well researched. We have the coalition. And in the midst of the super minorities that we had, were able to get funding for Black-led organizations across this state. So it's one of those things where you just have to keep at it. You kind of never know where you're going to make those strides, but more than anything, women speaking up, sharing their stories has really made the difference. And leadership matters. Former Vice President Kamala Harris was also a huge leader of this space, having convenings, even at the White House level, providing that funding. Before we fully expanded Medicaid, we extended it 12 months postpartum, knowing it would also improve Black maternal health outcomes as well. So a lot of work, more to come, but we're definitely making a difference in that regard.
Absolutely. Leader Batch.
So just briefly, I was at an event talking to the Durham Medical Society, and I was there with one of my colleagues who's a Republican doctor in the House. And they asked about maternal health. We talked about Black maternal health, and his response with regards to the outcomes in reference to DEI was, look, women just aren't eating well. They're on drugs. And they also just, frankly, don't have access to health care. And so then a lot of doctors, of course, confronted him about how racist his statement was, because apparently we can't have healthy babies because we're all addicted to drugs. And then I had the opportunity to speak, and I said, I find it really interesting that we just won't talk about the elephant in the room, because a lot of my Republican colleagues are trying to erase the fact that we have institutional racism, that we have racist doctors who are not educated with no cultural competency, and that as a woman with 3 degrees, I actually had a failed induction, and thank God, because I have a mother who's an OBGYN who was in the room with me, was able to, of course, tell my OBGYN, who was a white woman, what was actually happening to me and my son. Not everybody has an OBGYN mother that can just be there to make sure that after 21 hours of a failed induction that my son could be born healthy. And then I also said, and the real sad tragedy is that very few people in our society and our Republican colleagues want to admit this. I have 3 degrees, I was educated, I had the best health insurance, I had access, and I had a mother who's an OBGYN. And yet, my outcome in my birthing story with regards to my first son was worse than what would happen for an 18-year-old white woman who has a high school diploma. Her outcomes are better than everything that I experienced. And I was fortunate because, of course, I knew how to use my voice and advocated. But when I had issues throughout my pregnancy, I also had my mother to rely on, and I continued to push, right? I continued to go forward, and I needed to have that conversation. We are serving every single day with individuals who just say, no, it's not that. We're going to ignore the fact that this has anything to do with regards to racism, because it makes them feel uncomfortable. And so when we're looking at legislation, and really the answer to much of what we have going on in this building is that we just have to get rid of the people who do not share our values. That's the only way that you're going to change this. And so we had an amazing press conference. We did a lot of advocacy. But if you're going to ignore our reality and you're going to live in a fantasy land and you actually just don't value our lives, we're going to have these same outcomes every single day. And so it is frustrating when we have hundreds of women who come and speak to legislators and their experience is not valued and no one actually says to them that you matter. They call us malingerers. They think that we are actually just complaining and we want pain meds. Because again, if the premise is that we're drug addicts from the first, then that's all that they're going to say.
Absolutely. Thank you for those responses and those stories. And so I want to leave a few minutes for audience questions. We'll have time for about 2 questions, and we do have a mic in the back. But before we get to the audience questions, as we leave the space today, we have discussed a lot, and there is a lot that is impacting our state right now. And I think we have driven home the point around the necessity of advocates and activists being in lockstep with you all in the building, and this work has to continue. It's difficult, it's heavy, but the work does have to continue. And so adding on to that, what is one thing, and I would like for each of you to answer, that you want to leave this space reminding folks of today?
Collectivism is better than rugged individualism. Making sure that, as she said and everyone has said, lock step, lock in. There are systems that have worked against us, and so their systematic approach has to be taken for us to be moving. And we can have degrees, we can have resources, but no man is above the crew, as they say. And so I think this is just an opportunity, as Senator Batch said, there's no reason that a woman as accomplished and as knowledgeable should have worse outcomes than an 18-year-old white woman. That should hit you in your gut. And so that means systematically we're going to have to work together. So all the organizations, all the positions you hold, let's make sure we're bringing those to bear, right? We have the president of the League of the Municipalities that's sitting with us, Mark Anthony Middleton. Use him, share what you can, he can share what you can do locally to enhance your local communities. We have people who are county commissioners across the state. Let's work in a very systematic way, because if we don't, the last 40 years will be child's play. And if this president and those who are around him get full control of power and keep it for another 4 to 8 years, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so the crisis is here, renaissance is needed.
Yeah. I would say, let's use our time and resources wisely. We've talked about the need to be in lockstep, to be collective. I also challenge us to also find joy. One of the things that has sustained us, our ancestors, is all the pain, all the trouble that they went to ensure that I get to sit in this seat today. We know what they went through. We can hold that in our hearts, but we also know that if you look back in our history, they also found places to have joy, whether that was through their faith, through their friends, through their family, through our food. And we don't talk enough about the fact that Black joy also has sustained us. And one of the things that systematic racism has done over the decades is we don't see joy anymore, uninhibited joy. We lock ourselves in, we think we can't smile because things are tough. But again, look at any photos in our history. You will see not just pain, because that's what we sensationalize, is the painful photos of our ancestors, but I ask you to hold in your heart and in your mind the joy that they found, because that is also what's going to get us through collectively, is to remind your brothers and sisters, Black joy is a necessity to the resistance.
Y'all better smile.
I forgot to tell y'all, I don't cook.
Where's the joy in that?
That's how I get joy. I
Yeah,
get
you're
food.
right. So Dr. King said that we all came on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. At the end of the day, we now know all too well. Now, everybody in this room already knew what America looked like and what it was. We have a lot of white people who were apoplectic after the election saying, I don't know how this could happen. I've also said that I think that frankly, so I think that the white women who voted the right way need to adopt the 53% of white women who voted the wrong way and actually bring them back on board. But anyway, I cannot. It's my theory, it will work, because they don't know how to act. Because privilege is not going to save them, right? Their white privilege is not going to save them, because we are in a legislature that is trying to literally erase the rights of women and of Black people and anyone who has melanation. If you are not a white man, you are not going to actually be someone they're going to protect. And so what I would tell you is, as we move through all of this, elections have consequences, okay? People are feeling that deeply. And a lot of people who thought that this current administration was going to be for them are now finding out that's not the case. So we are in a really great point in our history where we can actually call them in instead of calling them out. Y'all, it's hard to hate up close, unless you're in the legislature. Some of our colleagues, it makes it real hard. But what I would tell you is calling people in and bringing them to our side, this is an opportunity not to lecture them, not to make them feel bad about their choices in the past, but to go ahead and let them do the same thing that I tell people all the time. In my real life, I'm a divorce attorney, right? One of the many things that I do. And I would say you're in a successful marriage if you agree with your spouse 75% of the time. Now, what I also tell voters is that we as your actual electeds are in a marriage, we're in a relationship, and if you can't look at your elected and say 75% of the time the choices that you make for me are actually aligned with my values, you're putting more food on my table, you're keeping a roof over my head, you're allowing me to have one job and have access to health insurance. If those things aren't happening, I don't care whether you're a D, an R, or you're an independent. You need to vote with the person who literally is going to help you better your life. And therefore, what I would say, my hypothesis is the Republicans that are currently serving are not doing that. And so it's time for those individuals to break up with their elected and get a divorce and choose a candidate that actually meets their values, regardless if it's a Democrat or a Republican.
UNITY. Okay, I'm not gonna sing. I'm not gonna sing. The main thing I would say, just to keep it short and sweet, make sure that the government is working for you and they're not doing things to you. So I'm just encouraging all of you to sit up, stand up, step up, and speak up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to really just encourage everyone to lean into our collective power. Since we've been in the U.S. so long, we've become more individualized, but truly in Black culture, it was about collective responsibility, collective power, and we all have a role to play. I know a lot of the workshops and the work that we'll be doing, a lot of the conferences we go to, we say, oh, we're singing to the choir, but the choir has to sing. The choir has to sing. You have altos, you have tenors, you have sopranos to get that harmony going. And so whatever your role is, we need you to do that. For our local elected officials, for all of us on this stage that are in the General Assembly, we've shared the struggles we're dealing with in Raleigh. There's more that you all can honestly do at the municipal level, at the county level, particularly with all these cuts coming along, of working to fill in those gaps. You all will be where the rubber hits the road. You don't have the luxury of passing the buck off to anybody else. So definitely for our local elected officials, we depend on you to do the things that we can't do. For activists, we need that outside-inside strategy. There are times where we need you to be those agitators, to show up at those meetings, to make sure folks are held accountable, that the electeds are held accountable, but also for folks that may not be as vocal. If it is back to, celebrating that Black joy, who's making the soundtrack to keep us going, who is feeding everyone with all the Black farmers market work that we're doing, who is having the physical space for us to collectively come together and organize and strategize. Whatever your role is, you need to do that at this time. We are in the civil rights movement of this time, and that's exactly what they did, whether it is donating money. I hopefully one of these panels will talk about these nonprofits have not even begun to feel the pain that is coming. With all these federal grants drying up, we're going to need more philanthropy. So whatever your role is, if you are a Black business owner and you are doing okay, these layoffs coming at the federal and state level, hiring people, the land and property you own, we may need it for affordable housing, whatever that looks like. There is space for you in this, and we need you to do that. The choir has to sing, and when you sing collectively, as one or two folks get tired, you can sub them in. This person's a little hoarse, you come on in, and everything keeps singing. But it's not gonna work if we don't collectively work together. We have to work with each other instead of against each other. Bust the silos, bust the cliques, work collectively together. That is the only way that we're gonna move forward.
I would say to anyone, and I know those particular folks are not in this room right now, but for folks who are apathetic, who are disengaged, and I know we all know folks like that, I would say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I had a conversation a couple years ago with a cousin of mine who was in high school, and he said to me, you know, Cousin Allen, I don't think, you know, when it comes time that I turn 18, I don't think I'm going to vote. And, you know, my initial response was, you know, one of my great uncles, let me tell you something, son. But, you know, I calmed myself down and I said, why is that? And he said, you know, I just don't think there's any politician out there who represents all of what I want. I said, hey, that's fair. But the way that we've made progress in this country is through any given public office holder at any given time. And where you can find someone in any race who represents as much of your values as possible versus another candidate in that same race who doesn't represent those values. We have cases in our history, Frederick Douglass, for instance, who was on record saying, I mean, very critical of Abraham Lincoln while he was president and before then. But when it came time for that, you know, re-election campaign of 1864, despite what Lincoln had said about supporting efforts in the past to basically ship African Americans to Liberia after freeing them, despite all that, Frederick Douglass said, I'm backing this man because the dude on the other side wants to end this war. He wants to end our efforts to free people. And so he used Lincoln as a vehicle to get progress for our community. And that's how we've got to think about some of our political candidates. And we've also got to make sure that our young people and our disengaged people understand that you're probably not going to get the perfect candidate every single time. But what you can do is you can support, you can vote, you can work for the best candidate to move the ball forward to the kind of vision that you have for our community.
Okay, I'm coming a little different, y'all. You see my hand, right? And I did this before. You see all that space between my fingers, right? No contact with the other fingers, right? But when we make that fist, and when we come together, we can do, the blow that we will have such a very valuable impact. And fear. God said, I did not give you the spirit of fear. And they're using fear to cause a lot of division, a lot of things to happen. And when you're scared, you don't move. When you're scared, you don't talk. Sometimes when you're so scared, you can't even think. And right now, that's where they want us. So we got to think about the days of old, when our ancestors, when they were in fear, they even had to sing a little bit. But they kept moving, they kept going, and that's why we are where we are today. So we got to think about our children, because they are dependent on us. So I'm just here to say that I'm going to continue to advocate. I know my colleagues are. Hold us accountable. If you're not involved, get involved. If you're not political, just do something. Just do something. But let's continue to fight. Let's continue to support our organizations that are out here, boots on the ground, that are really running hard for us and trying to make sure that you all have the information that you need to have that are happening to us, because sometimes we can't get it all out there. But here, I just say fear. And just think about this blow. Now don't go hitting everybody, you know. Don't, because some folks I do feel like need this right now. And I'm not a violent person, I'm not. But I think sometimes you just feel like that's when you really want to do that, you know. But that's it, that's right. So, but just think about, this is us, all of us. We got to be this right here in order to continue to make things go and make things happen. Thank you for having us here today.
I'm not quite sure how to follow that up, but I think for me, the biggest takeaway has to be that the moral imperative is to win. I think oftentimes we're not remembering that we're all in this game to change lives. And you change lives by changing policy. You change policy by changing policymakers. And so these elections are the end-all be-all for whatever specific policies that we're trying to move forward. That campaign trail is where we have to get involved and ensure that we're flipping these seats, ensuring that we're getting people involved. And I think everyone on this panel essentially spoke to the same thing. And it's the idea that at the end of the day, we also have to listen to voters. I think too often we're in this bubble, we read and watch politics all the time, and we think we know better than the average voter. I've seen people go to a college campus, get frustrated they can't get students to vote, and they're on college campuses talking about Medicaid and Social Security. So you need to realize at no point has anybody ever opened up a business and got mad that people didn't want their services and product. No, you iterate, you change the message, and you figure out at the end of the day what the customer wants. And in this case, it's voters. So I want folks to continue to stay optimistic. I think there's a lot, especially good things that we took away from this panel. I mean, we have leadership on every part of the government that we should be optimistic about. And then realizing these campaigns are where it starts and stops. And please don't listen to political consultants, listen to your own experience. And I think at the end of the day, we have to make those determinations. I think it's Henry Ford that said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And so we have to go out and ensure that we have the right message, the right voters, and put in the work and win these seats. Because I think too much we get into these rooms, and especially black folks, our artistic ability to describe the problems has no limits. We speak beautifully about these things. But we need to take that same energy to the battleground districts and to these congressional seats where we need to start flipping some of these folks. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And so we are going to entertain one question, quick question. No, they were beautiful answers, but
One person answer.
Yes.
Hello, Tessa. Good morning, Gary McCants, Greensboro Business League. What's more important right now, is it the budget or policy, and how much money will we lose as a result of some of these bills being introduced?
What I would tell you is that the Senate changed their rules recently to say that the budget is no longer just about numbers like what we do every single day when we sit down at our kitchen table. You don't have a line item that says, why do I pay my mortgage? Because I don't want to be homeless. But the Senate budget allows for us to do that. They're putting policy and they are putting the budget. All of that is in the same boat. And so what is so malignant about that process is that we no longer vote on just a standalone policy about whether or not we stand for that or against it. They're doing all of it at the same time, running roughshod over our rights and then pretending that we should be happy about it and to shove it down our throats. That Senate budget is a dumpster fire. There is absolutely nothing, very little in that is worthy. They get rid of vast majority of positions, do not raise, they get rid of an outrageous amount of current employed state employees. While doing that, they go ahead and they get rid of environmental justice individuals at DEQ who are supposed to be fighting for our rights. They're getting rid of positions that are currently filled, saying that we don't need them and they're redundant. They're passing their equivalent Elon Musk Doge Act in the Senate budget by saying that we already eliminated them, but we're going to go ahead and start eliminating more people and allow a damn computer to decide which people should be employed in the state of North Carolina. And they are in the process of course, getting rid of HUB and every other damn thing that values our lives and benefits us. And so what I tell you is that they are not mutually exclusive. They are 100% on the same page and together. They can no longer be divided. And that's the reason why when this moves over to the House, our House colleagues are going to be the ones who hopefully deliver a budget for North Carolinians that we actually deserve instead of the one we just passed in the Senate.
Absolutely. Thank you for that response, and thank you so much. If we could give a round of applause to our panelists for today. Thank you so much for being here.